Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Kelly Fremon Craig, a writer, producer, and director whose breakout first feature, The Edge of 17, closed TIFF in 2016. Her latest film, an adaptation of Judy Blume's beloved novel, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, opened earlier this year and is now zipping along on disc and digital. It's very sweet and very smart, and you should check it out. Kelly picked Richard Linklater's Before trilogy, or more specifically, the first two films, Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, the initial encounters of Ethan Hawke's Jesse and Julie Delpy's Celine in Vienna in 1996 and Paris in 2005. I mean, we'll be discussing Before Midnight as well, it's inevitable, and I know Maureen Judge picked the trilogy for her Simcast way back in episode 66, but the fact that 7 years have passed since that episode, which is almost a full before, got me thinking that revisiting them from a new perspective might not be the worst idea. So, once again, this is Someone Else's Movie.
You know, I think there's certain films that just get inside you and just live with you forever. And that's what these two did for me. I just carry them with me everywhere. I just think that there's something so deeply honest and real about both of these films, and I'm so incredibly inspired by the fact that he could just set a camera on two people for an entire movie, for two entire movies, three actually, but just talking about these two, and have it be so riveting and make me feel so many different things and go on such a ride with these characters. So I'm just bowled over by the writing and the acting and just the whole making of it.
It's one of those incredible hindsight experiences, isn't it? Because in 1996, none of us knew we'd be here. They didn't. They had absolutely no plan. They were just making this little movie because Linklater was feeling uncertain about where he stood in having just made Dazed and Confused and trying to figure out what he wanted to do next. He wanted to do something smaller he just said with fewer distractions. That was his thing. And
I didn't know that.
Hawke is in this place where right after Reality Bites, he's not sure who he wants to be. He definitely doesn't want to be the movie star that they're trying to shape him into. Julie Delpy is just popping in, I want to say period dramas. She'd made 2 or 3 period films in France, but suddenly here this is, and it launches. I mean, it's not technically what we understand as a franchise, but I love that about it because it just refuses to be any of those things. Yes. And this is the bit where I say that I just happened at the festival this year to be tapped to moderate some filmmaker lab stuff. So I ended up spending 2.5 hours on stage with Linklater and Hawke.
Oh my gosh.
And it came up, right? I mean, of course it does.
Okay. Oh, this is so cool. I'm like, yes. Are they gonna do another one?
They won't talk about it. It came up a lot because there were about 25 people in the audience asking various versions of that question. And Linklater just said it would be if we kept it to 7 years, it would have to be a period piece now about the pandemic because Midnight came out in 2013, and it would either have to be just before or during. And he said that felt like a challenge nobody wants right now. Nobody wants to revisit that experience just yet. So I don't know, maybe they'll sit it out and just pick it up at the 14-year mark instead.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I don't know why, but this whole entire time I thought it was 10 years. I never realized it was 7 years. That's why you said 7 years. Okay. Yes. Yeah. The whole time I thought it was they were each 10 years apart, but yes. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. Well, I think it's 96, 2004, and 2013. So that it's elastic, but I think they wanted it to be 7, 7, and 7 once they started going like the Michael Apted documentaries.
Right.
The snapshot of a relationship at these different points in time. And it was supposed to be, I think with Before Midnight too, it was supposed to allow for the age differences in their kids. That Jesse's son was already a teenager or coming up to it. And and they had twins and they were little girls and there was a gap there that they could capture.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Because that's the thing that Sunrise and Sunset can do that Midnight can't, which is really just have the two of them be alone.
That's exactly right. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, yeah, life gets more complicated as as they have a family and stuff. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and in Midnight they have that friend group that they're hanging out with on the island. That
Hmm.
there's this sense of a life that they've built for themselves, but sunrise and sunset exists in both cases. It's the will they, won't they. It's the liminal nature of what could
Yes.
happen next, and
Yes.
what their future
Yes.
is. And
Yeah.
I'll step out of the way and let you talk, I promise. But I
Mm-mm.
will say that I still think the ending of Before Sunset is the greatest cinematic ending ever.
I completely agree. Completely agree. I think, baby, you're gonna miss that plane. I know. It's just, I don't know how you get better than that. I don't know how you get better than that. It's perfect. It's
Yeah,
perfect. It's perfect.
it
Yeah.
is. It's got resignation. It's got happiness. It's got excitement,
Yes.
adventure. Like you feel like you want to stay, and the way that it just lingers lets us stay in that moment forever. This moment of
Yes.
incredible potential where they really do finally have their whole lives out ahead of them, and it's going to be messy
Yes.
and things are going to get destroyed, and it's going to be unhappy for a little while, but
Yes.
all the questions are answered right in that moment.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Yeah. I think it's I think it's really a masterclass in how to end a film because it's so satisfying without tying things perfectly up. Like it's just it just gives you everything you want and nothing more, you know?
I think that's Linklater's gift too, is that he understands that the movie doesn't have to end, it can simply stop.
Mhm.
Like so many of his
Yes.
films just have this sense of life that's extending beyond the frame, from before, from after,
Yes.
from during. Like there's all kinds of these pinballs happening and bouncing around. And
Yeah.
the before films are sort of now this contract with the audience that we're just going to drop in for a
Yes.
little while.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I think that's part of what I admire so much about these films is they do feel so completely slice of life and so um they feel so real, so sort of almost almost like documentarian style, you know. I mean, it just feels like you're just a fly on the wall watching something totally real happen. And when I watch them, I always have this feeling like it could have happened to me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's certain things where it feels like it's so real that it feels like it could have been a memory from your own life, you know? Um, yeah, I just think I think he has such a gift for that. Um, just creating you know, creating something cinematically that feels so real. Um, it's just easy to suspend your disbelief that you're watching a movie even, you know?
Yeah. Well, and of course, the fact that I mean, we really haven't. We've only spent, what, 4.5 hours with these people. But
Mhm.
the way they
Yes.
recur in our lives and the way they keep echoing back and forth with their own history and with our history, and inevitably, like, you're going to think about who you were the last time you saw them. The,
Mhm.
the
Yep.
films engage with us on a personal level like almost nothing else can, because of the
Yes.
way they're presented, because of the way they're delivered. I mean, I'm assuming I was the right age. I was like, I think
Yeah.
2 years older than Jesse. I
Mhm.
still am, I suppose, when I
Right,
saw Before
yes.
Sunrise, and it was just
Yeah.
so striking to see a film that was unconcerned with capturing the youth of the moment, right? Like it's not like a like
Yes.
Kevin Smith where he needs immediately to establish a language and an atmosphere and a
Yes.
world. And you do it with Edge of 17 too, where you tell us right away what kind of teenagers we're seeing,
Mhm.
but it's not it doesn't prevent us from connecting to them. It's not stylized in the
Mhm.
same way. It's just more of an attitude within the film. And Before Sunrise just starts so gently that we get to bring our own preconceptions, and they don't necessarily get contradicted. Everything is just there to be
Yes.
embraced.
Yes, yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's honestly such a magic trick that he pulled off. Um, um, these films shouldn't work. I mean,
I
that's what's
know.
amazing. Like they
Yeah.
shouldn't work as well as they do. You should be bored in the middle of them. I mean, it shouldn't I'm just like absolutely in love with both characters, absorbing every second of it and deeply invested in what will happen to them. And the
Yeah.
fact that he can make that happen just by me watching a conversation with two people is wild. Is really, I just admire it so much. I definitely had wildly different experiences watching each one, and actually watching the third one. The experience for me with that one was it hit almost too close to home. So I have to watch it now. I have to go back and watch it again. But at the time, I remember it being like, oh no, oh God, like it was too close to my own, just too close to my own experiences.
Oh yeah. Anybody who's had
But
any kind of lengthy relationship is going to recognize so
yeah,
much.
totally. And it was almost painful it was almost like painful to watch. Whereas the other two have there's such a there's such a sort of like wistful, there's a romance to them, even though I think it's so different from, like, I hate to use that word because that makes it sound too like glossy and beautiful. Like there's just a very pure, um I don't know. It's a different kind of romance. In that it feels like it could have happened to you. It feels like life. It feels like that sort of romance. It has that messiness to it. Um, yeah. The third one, the third one, once they are together, doesn't have that same will they won't they question at the center
Mm.
of it. Um, but it's interesting. I've got to go back and revisit that
Oh,
and
God.
experience it again. Yeah.
The anxiety of that third act of that argument
Yes.
is just so, because there's that thing that people recognize, and the audience, I mean, if you see it with a crowd, the audience feels
Hmm.
it the same way that you do, and everybody just gets tense, and there's this
Yes.
stomach churning tension to that
Yes.
argument.
Yes. That
And
was it. That was it.
yeah,
Yes.
it's
Uh-huh.
recognizing, and we've all been in it ourselves,
Hmm.
but it's seeing Celine decide to fight back, like that
Hmm.
moment where she takes stock and then just goes, well, all right, fuck it, we're doing this, and just comes at him. And it's
Yes.
not
Uh-huh.
violent, it's just emotionally honest, and it's the
Yes.
thing that we know she can do because we've seen her do it in the previous movies. We've seen her just turn on the
Yes.
analytical sense and cut right through Jesse's bullshit. And that's the other beauty of
Yes.
the films, all three of them, is that they know
Hmm.
Jesse's a bullshitter. He's not
Yes.
wrong all the time, and he's not
Hmm.
misguided, but he
Yeah.
has the confidence of a guy who can talk himself out of things, or into
Yes.
them. And Celine I think, is the only person who's ever seen through him right away, every time. And so that
Yes.
first half of that argument where he's making his protestations, he's not wrong. He's justified in some of the
Hmm.
things he says, and she seems to acknowledge that. And then he oversteps, and she decides she's just not going to let him off the hook. And that's
Yeah.
where your heart is in your throat, because it, like, it's not about how she responds. We know how she's going to respond. It's how Jesse takes
Hmm.
it that's going to define the rest of their lives. And now,
Yeah.
like in Midnight, there are stakes. They have kids
Hmm.
together. Like, that's the thing
Yes.
about the beauty of Sunrise and Sunset, is that they really
Hmm.
don't. It's the first two times
Yes.
these people have met. Like
Yes.
there's no
Hmm.
baggage other than their romantic memories of each other. And even then,
Yes.
in Sunset, Celine cuts through that. Oh no, we didn't sleep together. I thought we did.
Right.
She just shoots
Yeah.
him. She just doesn't put up with it, and that's why she's
Right.
worthy of him, right? And he's worthy of her because he continues to invest in the
Yes.
same way that they want to be honest with each other, and they keep running over their own roadblocks and their own, um, you know, their own. It's not a hang up exactly, but I think the difference is that when they do finally argue in Midnight, it's the first time we've seen them fight, and they know each other so well because they're
Hmm.
soulmates. Ultimately, if you
Yes.
argue with this whole thesis, right, if there is such a thing as a soulmate, that's why we're watching this couple.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so to have them fight and really fight makes it intimate and uncomfortable and personal, because
Hmm.
I'm more invested in these fake people than they are in me. So
Yes.
don't let me
Yeah.
down.
Yes, totally.
Be worthy of
Totally.
my love too.
Yes, yeah. Of the three, do you have a favorite?
I think it's got to be Sunset,
Yeah.
because of the potential, because it's 90 minutes of two people not saying I've always loved you, and
Yes.
it's so thrilling to watch it, and to watch them fight
Yeah.
against each other, to watch that pang in the scene where Jesse talks about seeing her, being sure he'd seen her, and then immediately writing it off. And Hawke being such a goddamn good actor that we understand
Yes.
it's the denial that let him go on with his life. Because if he
Yes.
hadn't, if he really knew he'd missed his chance, it would have destroyed him. And
Yes.
here he is talking
Mhm.
it through and watching Delpy, who's just as good. I mean,
Mhm.
I do think that
Mhm.
over the last 15 years, Ethan Hawke has probably become maybe the finest actor of his generation with
Mhm.
nobody looking. He's just quietly refined this thing he does.
Yes. Totally agree.
And,
Yeah.
I bounced it off of him a couple of times in interviews, and he absolutely refuses to understand or accept it. It's like, no, no. And then he'll pause and say, I mean, I got better. But he's such a fantastic person to talk to. He's got absolutely no ego, and I think you need that in order to be this person for Linklater, to be the muse that he
Yes.
is, and
Mhm.
to embody this sort of the disappointment of a generation in Jesse, who, it's
Yes.
not like he didn't live up to his potential. They gave him a decent life as a fictional character. He's written his
Mhm.
books in the same way Hawke has become a writer and director on his own.
Yeah.
But he doesn't feel like he's a success. He
Mhm.
feels like he's still struggling. And so he has to pump up his intellectual bona fides and just impress people. And Celine
Yeah.
has been with him by the point of before midnight long enough to be tired of it, but to still
Yes.
admire the effort.
Mhm. Yes, yeah. 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 I think, Sunset is my favorite too. I think that there's such something so beautifully heart-wrenching about all the years of what could have been if they had,
Yeah.
if they had gotten together. So I think I think that film in particular makes me think about my own life because I think um, we all have those things in all sorts of different, not just in romantic relationships, but but in career
Oh,
and
yeah.
all sorts of decisions. There's the door that we went through, and then there's all the doors that we didn't go through, and
Yeah.
what could have been, what was behind those. So it's sort of like I feel like we all walk around with like this graveyard of like the could have beens, Um, and so yeah, I love that they have this shot, and one of my favorite lines too is when he says that he feels like when he's talking about his own relationship back in the States, he says, it feels like we're two people managing a small nursery or something like that. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there are so many lines that just like cut straight down to the heart of of relationships, of life, just all like it just feels like they're talking about so many of the things that I constantly find myself pondering. They're saying out loud so many of those things. Yeah.
And that's the nature of the experiment, I think, of what Linklater does is he's giving
Hmm.
himself room to be mundane, but also to be deep in his mundanity, if
Yes.
that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
they're the
Uh-huh.
things that you would want to say to people if you thought they could understand it, if they thought they could
Yes.
understand
Uh-huh.
you.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
so we have this collision of two people who are just perfect for each other right
Hmm.
away. Like the audience knows it well before they do, and
Mm-hmm.
so you get to watch it develop. You get to watch them miss their window, and then yeah, as you say, it's just life. It's not nobody betrayed anybody else. Nobody stood
Hmm.
anyone up. Somebody died and he couldn't come.
Hmm.
That was it. Like it's really
Right.
that simple. And this
Yes.
this
Yeah.
this little dream he had of going back and meeting the French girl just didn't happen. And
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
haunted him.
Hmm.
And some part of him wakes up again in Sunset
Yeah.
when he sees her. And that's the like that's the thing that I love so much about the second film, is that it is the moment, it's the top of the roller coaster for the whole movie. We don't get
Yes.
the ride, right?
Yes. Uh-huh. Yes.
We've
Yep.
never seen the ride. And I love that about
Yes.
those films as well. We're denied all the big points. We're denied their first night together. We're denied their first meal together. We don't
Yes.
see any of it.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
just get them talking. We just get them living and
Yes.
existing in the moment, and we just get to hang out with them. And
Yes.
Linklater's first feature to break out was Slacker, which is nothing but conversation, or not even conversations, nothing but monologues.
Yeah.
So he can
Yeah.
clearly write to character. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing that stuns me in Sunrise, whenever I revisit it, is this is his first film where it's back and forth, where it's just all
Yes.
conversation. And the
Yeah.
rhythms are so natural. And he even has a couple of moments where somebody talks too long or something hangs in the air. And the confidence to do that,
Yes.
to just let it be
Mm-hmm.
awkward and let these
Yep.
people feel each other out, it's
Yes.
remarkable.
Exactly. And I feel like it's all of those things that make it feel like life, and as
Yeah.
they're falling in love with each other, we're falling in love with them, with the two of them and them together, the idea of them together. Yeah, I think that's why it got in me so deeply, is that it feels, I think it's that it really feels like the way you fall in love with someone, where there's no, it doesn't feel like most movies where you cut away and you miss all the in between. Like, you don't miss any of it. You
Mhm.
experience all of it. Um, yeah.
But there's no
Yeah. And
filter.
just
There's no one there to cut.
there's
There's no
yes,
editorial strategy.
exactly. Exactly. Yes, exactly. It just goes on the way life does. Yep.
Yeah.
And the way the night does. It's so, yeah, it's so beautiful. And I also, I heard, I don't know how exactly this worked, but I heard the three of them wrote it together, and they would, like, I wonder what their process was. Do you have any
Exhausting,
idea?
apparently. Yeah, we
Really?
did talk
Yeah.
about it a little bit. He said there is no improvisation in any of the three films. They're all scripted. They had to be for timing.
Really?
Yeah, they had to get it right for
Mhm.
timing and blocking with the long shots. The big walk they take in Midnight had to
Mhm.
be moment to moment. They had to know exactly what was going to happen, exactly what point, just so they could navigate it. But all three films are heavily scripted. The first one was mostly scripted before they put it together, before the
Mhm.
actors got really involved, but then they made some contributions that were then incorporated.
Okay.
Sunset was a collaborative effort where they just sent the script back and forth to each other, and they had these long phone calls and broke it down that way. And then Midnight was the three of them. I think over the course of a couple of months, actually writing it together and figuring out how it would work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm always surprised to realize that it's scripted because it's so naturalistic. There's so much air.
So naturalistic. Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm also just so interested in the actual process of being three people writing a script. I think because I've always written alone, I'm trying to
Mm.
imagine how that works. Like, do you write a draft and then and then you email it to the other person and they rewrite over you? Like, how do they divvy it up? Do they say, like, you write this conversation, we'll write that, like, I don't know how, I'm like fascinated by it. And the fact that it could feel so seamless, even with it, with the three of them writing.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week I wrote about the physical arrivals of the streaming series WandaVision, The Mandalorian, and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and the new 4K restorations of The Color Purple, Titanic, and Point Break. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Simcast Twitter account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. Linklater said years ago, I think we were talking for Everybody Wants Some, and we were just talking about how that film is like Dazed and Confused. It's a dozen different voices all running back and forth. And he said that was actually easier to write than a before film because you can go back and fix a line And it's like, well, this character's changed in my mind. I think he can do this, or she can go there. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
Jesse and Celine are inviolate. It's not just him writing it. He has to run it by. And Hawke weighs in on Celine, and Delpy weighs in on Jesse, and they'll call each other out. And Linklater says, like, I pretend I have final say, is what I think he said at the time.
Yeah,
but it's like they're the ones talking on the set. It has to come out of the actors. They have to believe it. So it's a genuine collaboration.
That's so interesting. So do they actually, so you're saying that Hawke weighs in on Jesse and Delpy weighs in on Celine. So
and
I
vice
wonder,
versa.
do they, oh, okay. Because that's what I was wondering. I was like, wait a minute, do they just sort of try to write their characters? Like, do they do that? Like, do they?
Oh, no, I think they do.
No,
I think all three of them write.
They do all of it.
Yeah.
They do all of it. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I was like, oh, that would be fascinating to think how that would work.
Yeah.
Huh.
Like
But anyway,
send Hawke Celine's monologue and have him respond.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's what I was wondering. Yes, I was like, that would be one way to write. It actually sounds like a lot of fun.
It'd be a fascinating collaboration. You'd want it. Would you do it in real time? Would you improvise something like that? I mean, they don't. They write. They don't
play it out. Yeah. Right.
But
yeah.
It does make you wonder how other writing teams do this stuff, and even people who don't act, or somebody like Jessica St. Clair and Lennon Parham, who created Best Friends Forever. They play out everything. They act every role and play every scene together in a living room. That's their process.
Wow. So they do it out loud.
Yeah, in character.
Everything. Wow, everything out loud, so I wonder if they record themselves and then they go back
and then transcribe it.
Wow. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, they talked about it once on a podcast, and I thought that is the most fascinating and exhausting way to create. Because if you if you get a good run, you've got 10 pages when you turn around.
Right. Yes.
But if you don't, it's death.
Oh, totally. Yes. Yeah. Oh, but that's so fascinating. I mean, I definitely just by myself, I'm like, I look like a lunatic because I'm just alone at my laptop, like saying lines out loud to myself, so it's like I'm sort of playing all the parts and walking around a room sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's often just trying to get the rhythm of something, or the blocking of something. But yeah, how interesting. That's really, it does sound exhausting, but also like a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I think if you're not doing it alone, right, it makes it easier.
Yes. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So interesting.
Does it help you with adaptation when you're working from somebody else's text to do that? Do you find it lets you find the actual speaking voice of a character when you're trying to write into it?
You mean to sort of say things out loud?
Yeah, the trick of capturing a voice.
It doesn't necessarily matter whether it's adaptation or anything. Like it's just sometimes saying it out loud just helps me hear it. I actually find the casting process to be really informative, because very often just having a bunch of people come in and read the same lines.
Sure.
There's so many things, so much that comes out of that, because you realize, first of all, you can see everybody tripping over the same sort of line, and you're like, oh, I've got to change that line because there's something that's just word salad in there that has to be changed. Or you hear something that you've always imagined one way, you hear it said another way, and you're like, oh, whoa, that's so much better, so I don't know. So I love the casting process for that reason. Like, so many ideas, I'm constantly taking notes. So many ideas come out of it.
Yeah, I've had those experiences of reading a book and then seeing a line of dialogue come right out on screen and just not hearing it the same way. It's like, oh, that's a different meter than I would have thought in my head.
Yes.
But for momentum and pacing and things, it strikes me as such a weird thing to navigate when you're translating something that every single person will read at a different pace, right? Or experience differently.
I actually have a thing where I have a really hard time listening to books on Audible for that reason, because if I have to go and I have to listen to the reader, and I have to judge whether I like their reading voice, because of that exact thing. There's something, sometimes if somebody says it, reads it in a certain way, I can't do it. because
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel the same way as when I'm reading it on the page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we all possess that version of the book, right? Whatever it
Hmm.
is going to be the way you see it in your head forever, which is the other reason I try not to I mean, it's less so now that I'm less of an active critic and more of a programmer on that side. But I
Hmm.
used to be that I just would avoid the book, the source, the play. You know, like I
Yes.
just want to see the movie the way the movie wants to show it to me with no expectations.
Yeah.
But when you're, say, adapting a 50-year-old novel that
Yeah.
generations of people have in their heads already,
Hmm.
I mean that's probably not intimidating in the slightest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, no, it was, um in the beginning, it was completely, paralyzing, to be honest, because, yeah, I was so aware of all the people that, like, are diehard about the book, and I'm one of those people,
Right.
so my own voice was very critical of everything. Um but I found that in order to sort of find my groove with the process, I really had to give myself permission to play and color outside the lines and really just um try to serve the spirit of it and ask myself, does it feel the way her book feels? And if it does, then it's okay. If it's wildly different than what's in the book, as long as it feels like the book, feels like it could have been in the book, a version of it in an alternate universe.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that for me, that switch for me, that mental switch was what freed me, what finally like unlocked me to be able to write it.
Linklater did say every time he thinks about going back to the before films, he's
Mhm.
worried that he'll get it wrong, that
Yeah,
he will they'll be in a place that they shouldn't be somehow. But
yeah.
then Hawke jumped in and said, "Well, you're the one who gets to decide that. Like you can't worry about the audience's expectation." He was convinced people would hate Jesse.
Really?
From Sunrise, from the very first, he was
Wow.
thinking this guy's an asshole, and I think it's how he had to get into him. It's how he had to play him
Mm.
because again, like he's coming out of that little window where Hollywood tried to package him as a star, and he
Yeah.
rejected it so
Mm.
violently that I think he
Mhm.
thought that's the kind of person he would be playing, like
Mm.
somebody who's
Right.
just he's smooth, he's well spoken, he knows what's going to happen, he's slick, he's a hustler.
Yes.
But we see right away just how transparent Jesse is, and so does Celine, which is
Right.
why we get to love
Yes.
them.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. I can so imagine how much pressure there would be to do a fourth one and feel like you're not feel like, "Oh god, what if you get it wrong?" And I don't actually think like what Hawk said about like, "Well, you get to decide." Like, I don't think that makes it any better or easier because actually, like, you can. I think sometimes, like, as a creator, the worst thing is when you think maybe you've gotten it right, but then with some fresh eyes, you realize, oh, I got it wrong. I don't like it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not about anybody else. I don't like it. I fucked it up. Um, so yeah, I can imagine it's like enormous pressure. Also because we're so invested in these people and we have been for decades now,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you don't want I don't know, you don't want these characters you love so much to end up somewhere that you feel like, no, that's not what would happen, because I think we all have a sense of them at this point. We all
Yeah.
have very strong feelings about them. Yeah.
We do. And it's also not like do we want drama? Do we want, as an
Hmm.
audience, I don't want to see them get sick. I don't want to see somebody in a
No.
cast. I don't want to see somebody get
No.
old.
Yes.
They have to be the model relationship for me. I have to see
Yes.
them. They need to be frozen in their early 40s and everything's okay, or with the possibility of happiness on the other side of this fight. And it's
Yes.
there, right? I mean, that the film, like Midnight Like Sunset, ends with them choosing to be together,
Right.
um,
Yes.
with the stakes being radically recalibrated. So it's less risky to stay
Mhm.
together now than it is to end the relationship.
Right. Yeah.
which I don't think is really in danger of happening. But because we're in the room with them when they're fighting, it feels real enough that like that
Yes.
whole third act is just excruciating. I mean, we've
Yes.
already discussed it, and I don't want to make you revisit it, but I didn't get to ask you at the beginning. Did you see Sunrise in '96? Have you had the same journey with them, or did you come to it later?
I came to it later.
Ah.
I came to it in the earlier mid 2000s. So I came to it really after Sunset already existed. So I watched them both almost back to back.
Oh
So that's why
wow.
those two for me are really linked, because I watched them back to back. So and then Midnight came out. What, in 2013, I think you said? Or
13,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it almost felt like one long movie to me. Do you know what I mean? When
Yeah.
like the two of them together are like they're two halves of a whole for me.
I mean, they were
Yeah.
for what, 6 years or so. That's
Yeah. Uh-huh.
which is
Yeah.
so
Uh-huh.
fascinating about them. Like each one, he said, each one is the only one, which I think is a
Yeah.
beautiful way of putting it. In that they add to the previous films, but they're the only one he can think about at the time. Like they're
Hmm.
not thinking about how things resonate. They don't want to do callbacks. They don't want to do lines of dialogue that resound or like that resonate further on down the line,
Right.
because that's
Yes.
that's what the audience thinks they want, and that's not what the
Hmm.
movies should be.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Because like
Yeah.
Jesse and Celine are allowed to have inside jokes, and I think there is this little shared laugh they have at the lunch scene, which is completely out of context, and we never understand what it is. It's just something someone says that they both kind of smile about
Right. Oh,
in a
in
wide shot. It's
Sunset?
not in Midnight. It's not called
Oh,
attention
okay.
to at
Uh-huh.
all. It's just there,
Right. Uh-huh.
and it's lovely because again, it feels like something that simply developed between these people who we know so well, and it
Right.
feels like being
Yeah.
on the other side of the table when you're at a place when that happens emotionally.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's
And
fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah. And ballsy, like gutsy to
yeah, to exclude the
be
audience.
like, yes, totally. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
many interesting filmmaking choices. I really, such confidence, such guts. And to pull it off so beautifully.
Yeah, it really is unique. I mean, I know Linklater made Boyhood, and he's working on an adaptation of Merrily We Roll Along, which is apparently going to stretch out
Yes.
over 20 years. Which
Yes.
we talked about it. It's like this is. He said, well, how did he put it? He said, I just want to have something to look forward to. Like he wants to feel like he's still going to be around in 18 years to finish this thing,
Yeah.
which is
Wow.
weirdly optimistic and sweet.
Yes. Yes, that is. Yeah. And I can't wait to watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just want everyone to be around for it. I just,
Mm-hmm.
because 20 years from now, who the hell knows? Like things are so. That's the other problem with making another Before movie.
Hmm.
Is it going to be about losing one of the kids to activism and the fault
Hmm.
lines that arrive between parents and children? I don't want that. I want Jesse and Celine. I want
I
those
know.
two people,
Yes.
and it's harder and
Yep.
harder to isolate them.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah. And where do you pick them up? Where do you pick them up on a fourth one? What? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with the pandemic pitch, they're that it would feel like a transparent excuse, and also, I think he was concerned about trying to recapture a moment that nobody wants to look at too closely just yet.
Oh yeah. No, 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 totally. I don't think any of us can take that right now. I completely agree. No.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen
No.
enough
Yeah.
pandemic movies with characters I'm not that invested in. I don't want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, 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 no. It was enough that we had to live through it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, totally agree. But I guess my question is like where we pick them up in their relationship, like what has
hmm,
happened at that point. Um, and how, I mean, the point you brought up about the will they or won't they is sort of central to each of the films. Like you would have to find a new way into like to keep with that trend. You'd have to
yeah.
find sort of a new way into that, which um
But
I
how do you
think
do
is
that without
interesting.
feeling contrived, right? If every movie is about
Exactly.
this, then
Yep.
it's we're
Yeah.
only seeing them at their most stressed or at their crisis point. And I don't know that that's what these movies are either, right?
Hmm.
Like the first hour
Yeah.
before midnight is so pleasant. because we're
Yeah.
finally seeing who they are as a couple, and we see what it means when they're fighting. We see what's at risk. And after this, it's just there's only so many stories, right? There's only so many places you can take this without becoming impossible or fantastical. And we've already had, that's the other thing too, like we've already had the one extravagant coincidence of them running into each other again.
Yes. Yes.
So the rest of their lives have to be.
So maybe that's it. Maybe it's those three and that's it. Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Me too.
Weirdly. It's not like we don't get to see the actors. It's not it's not like anything else has stopped, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And I do think it's wonderful that at a place right now where IP is king and they would have no trouble making a fourth one if they wanted to, they just choose not to. I think there's something beautiful to that.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
it really makes it's really about what's best for the project, what's best for the story. It's serving that and making that central rather than, since we could, we will,
Yeah. I mean, everything now is positioned as a possible franchise. I mean, were you pitched The Edge of 18, The Edge of 19, and people want to revisit that? Like, is that a thing that happens?
I do. Yeah, I do. Yes, there are. I do think that constantly happens. But I have to say, in the last 6 months or so, I have felt it shift away from that. I think because people are realizing that the things that they thought were sure bets aren't sure bets, and I think that they're finding that like audiences are responding more to original material and stuff like that. So I'm actually feeling a real shift away from that, which I think is exciting. Feels like we reached this sort of inflection point. So I don't know. That makes it's heartening. It's encouraging.
God, I would like nothing more than to walk into a theater and see something fresh and original and new without, without being hooked to 5 other things or a packaging deal. And it's not like those things aren't happening. It's just that they're not being supported at the same level.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. But I think we're going to, in the next few years, see that start to shift, at least based on all the conversations that I'm hearing. I think people are realizing that most people feel the way you do. And I feel that way. I feel the way you do. I think people are finally realizing like there's a sequel fatigue. There's a remake fatigue that's happening.
Certainly it feels that way. I mean, it feels that it's felt like that for me for a long, long time. But I mean, I'm also in a privileged position of seeing everything.
Yes. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I've been there. I've been there a long time too.
There's this drive-in theater we go by on the way to see Kate's parents in Oakville, and it's got 3 screens and the 6 titles, right? There's always a double bill. And we've made a game of just like sequel, franchise, IP sequel. And one film maybe out of like Oppenheimer this summer was the only thing that wasn't, and that's a biography technically.
Yes.
And Christopher Nolan is his own franchise and however else you want, but it was otherwise like The Meg 2 and Barbie and Exorcist 17 and all these things that Jigsaw. And it's just, please, let there be 2 original things.
I know. Totally. Yep. Yeah. Do you go to the drive-in theater? That's just such a throwback to me. I love that.
I haven't for years, no.
Yeah.
I
would love to do that. Yeah, we don't have any. I don't have one near us. Yeah.
They set up one on the grounds at Ontario Place in 2020, mostly for the pandemic, but it ran for a good year because it was a safe way to get people out to see the movies. And I did not get to go, but there was a screening of the restoration of David Cronenberg's Crash, which to my mind is now the only time to go to a drive-in, like that perfect form, that meta commentary of seeing a movie in a car about cars.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know that anything else could top that.
Yeah, I get it. Totally get it.
Yeah. But I do see the appeal. I would imagine that there's a huge untapped market for both the nostalgia and the novelty, because there's generations of people who've never gone to a drive-in.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm old enough that when I went as a kid, they were terrible.
Oh, really?
Bad sound, bad projection, mosquitoes everywhere. I mean, this was the 80s.
Right. Yes. That's when I went. And it was magic. I mean, it
Oh
was
yeah.
like, yeah, I just remember, having like as kids, like having our sleeping bags in the back of the minivan and the little, it was shitty sound. It was like the little thing that sits on your window. Yeah. Tinny, and it was terrible. But there was something so cozy about it. I don't know. It's like it's such a nostalgic, wonderful thing in my head. Like it's so vivid in my memory that I would love to. I would love if they really made a real comeback.
I'm thinking this is the fourth film.
Yes.
Jesse and Celine at a drive-in, because he'd have opinions about coming from Texas and all the American experiences, and she'd hate the movie.
Right. Yeah.
And the girls would be
totally.
restless, and it would give you real time, right? Like it would give you
Yes.
100 minutes of them in a single space.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I have to pitch this.
We've just cracked it.
All right. The only thing is that they won't let us know about it. They'll just shoot it in secret, and it'll just show up someday.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
This would be a perfect out, except I also have to ask the obvious question, which is, I was when the suggestions came through, I was trying to figure out how to line it up. Is there, the podcast always ends with the same question, which is there something of the film you chose that's reflected in your work? Have you borrowed or lifted or outright stolen anything from the before films in your own work?
Oh my God. That's a great question. Well, I feel like they're so in me that the spirit, I do think I'm always trying to channel a little bit of the spirit of them. I guess in the naturalism of the films, like that's a big part of what has made me fall so deeply in love with them, is just how totally real every frame feels. So I guess I'm always shooting for that. That always feels like the North Star,
Yeah. I mean, I can see that landing for filmmakers in a way that it just doesn't land with the average audience member, just because even I, on my periphery of the industry, I know how hard it is to get this right and to make it feel like it's tossed off and easy and natural.
Yes, exactly. Because the amount of effort that goes into making it look effortless is really ironic. Yeah.
My thanks to Kelly Fremon Craig, whose new film, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, is now available on Blu-ray and DVD from Lionsgate and streaming on Stars in the US and Crave in Canada. Thanks also to Emily Lou Waldrick and Mia Klein. They know what they did. You can follow Kelly on Instagram at Kelly Fremon Craig, all one word, and you can find the entire Before trilogy on Blu-ray and DVD in a beautiful box set from the Criterion Collection. Sunrise and Sunset are also streaming on Crave in Canada, and Midnight is streaming on Prime Video, Tubi, and AMC Plus in Canada, and on Max in the US. And of course, all three films are available to rent and buy on various VOD services. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or this show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.